What's up guys, Asian here again with another build video, and today we're going over the Magicka Templar DPS. Now, much like other Magicka DPS specs that we have covered so far in Greymoor, Magicka Templars will also be running the Vampire Spammable Blood for Blood in Greymoor in order to push out the most amount of single target DPS that you possibly can. Now, I know for some of you this definitely is not something that is preferable, so as an alternative, I have also developed a Templar build that does not use Blood for Blood, and I'll be showing you guys that bar setup as well as a parse of that I did with that setup, so you guys can see the DPS difference and decide for yourself whether you want to use Blood for Blood or not on your Magicka Templar. When we do our parse, I will be doing the Blood for Blood parse, but I will show you guys the alternative setup that I've made for non-Vampire Magicka Templar DPS. So, just like the rest of our build videos, we will not be going over any sort of gear. Gear is reserved for the Magicka DPS gear video, which should be popping up in the upper right-hand corner right about now. So if you're interested in knowing what sort of gear you should be running as a Magicka DPS, go ahead and check out that video. You guys can then come back here, take a look at the skills and the rotation. So let's go ahead and get started here first with our front bars. So again, I'm going to show you guys the vampire bars first, then I'll show you the non-vampire setup that I ran earlier, which I found to be pretty decent. So for our vampire bar, we are running Blood for Blood as our primary spammable. Then we have Blazing Spear, Purifying Light. Purifying Light does give us a small heal every 2 seconds for 6 seconds after it ends, so we can use this to help us heal through Blood for Blood. Because we have a fair amount of dots that we have to put down, you're actually not going to be using Blood for Blood continuously very often, so the heal that you're getting from Purifying Light should be able to cover most of the health cost for Blood for Blood. Then we have Radiant Oppression, obviously, known as J-Beam. Then we have Inner Light for the additional Magicka, and then we have Shooting Star here for the Magicka bonus and the Magicka Regen bonus. On our back bar, we have Solar Barrage. This is for the basically infinite power that we get from it. Unstable Wall of Fire. Barbed Trap for the Minor Force. You can also run the Sigil Order skill known as Channel Acceleration for the Minor Force if you're playing at ranged. Obviously, you're playing at range and you won't be using Blood for Blood. You'd be using something like Force Pulse or Elemental Weapon instead. Force Pulse is probably going to be the better option here. It adds a little bit of cleave, but Elemental Weapon is another viable option here if you decide to go with that. Then we have Channeled Focus. Not really necessary if you're using Blood for Blood. It can be beneficial because you get that Major Resolve, which does help out your overall survivability, plus you get some Magicka back. If you're using Blood for Blood, you're not using Magicka as your main spammable resource, so you don't really need Channeled Focus. You can replace this with another ability like a Shield or a Self-Heal or something like that. Then we have Mystic Orb here for the damage. This is probably going to be one of the better damaging abilities that we have in the game right now. It also activates the Combustion Synergy, which gets resources back to anybody who activates it, so it's useful for helping out overall DPS sustain. It does share the synergy with Energy Orb, which is the healing morph of this ability though, so just keep that in mind. Then we have Crescent Sweep. This is going to be our main damage ultimate. This is, again, what we're going to be using. We're actually not going to be using Shooting Star as our main ultimate at all. This is going to be the ultimate that we're going to be using instead. Very cheap, only 73 ultimate, even with the vampire increase in cost, so not that big of a difference. If you're not a vampire, it'll cost 72 ultimate instead. Now, if you decide to go with a non-vampire build, or if you're in a position where you can't run Blood for Blood, then you have Puncturing Sweeps here on the front bar. You're going to put Blazing Spear on the back bar and replace that with Solar Barrage here on the front bar. You don't have to shift these two abilities around, but I personally found it to be a little bit easier for me personally when I have Blockade, Unstable Wall, and Shard on the same bar, just because they have the same duration. It's easier for me to kind of pair these two together, so I don't have to do this. But the main reason why we had Blazing Spear here when we had Blood for Blood is we still need a Aedric Spear passive ability here in order to get the Piercing Spear passive with additional crit damage. So if we're running sweeps as our spammable, then we don't have to worry about that because Puncturing Sweep does count towards Piercing Spear. Now, if you're playing at range, which you might need to because you're a Magicka DPS, you'll probably be using something like Force Pulse here on the front bar, in which case you will need to go back to this setup here. So this is bar setup again with this spammable place here. This is if you're not able to run Puncturing Sweep. If you are able to run Puncturing Sweep, then I do recommend swapping where Spear and Solar Barrage are, just because this way you have Blazing Spear and Unstable Wall sort of tied together here. They both have the same duration at 10 seconds, so it's just a little bit easier just to remember I'm running Unstable Wall. I also have to re-up Blazing Spear. That's at least my way of kind of going through this. So let's switch this back here, because for the parse we will be running Blood for Blood. And so that pretty much covers it for all the skills that you might want to run on a Magicka Templar. So in terms of rotation, Magicka Templars actually have quite a few dots that you need to maintain here. So we have 4 dots in the back bar: Solar Barrage or Blazing Spear, Unstable Wall, Barbed Trap, Mystic Orb. Then on the front bar you have 2 dots to maintain: Purifying Light, and then Blazing Spear or Solar Barrage again, along with your spammable. So in total, you have 6 dots to maintain along with your spammable here, which basically means your rotation is going to be a little bit dynamic. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you have Blazing Spear and Blockade or Unstable Wall combined together, they both last 10 seconds. Same thing here with Solar Barrage. Solar Barrage lasts 10 seconds, Unstable Wall lasts for 10 seconds. You can also combine these two together here. That's one of the reasons why swapping Solar Barrage with Blazing Spear is going to be, in my opinion, the best option here, because then you can just tie these two together. Now, Mystic Orb also has a 10-second duration, so in actuality, while you have a lot of dots, you can actually combine at the very least 3 of them on your back bar together. So that'd be Mystic Orb, Unstable Wall, Solar Barrage, or Blazing Spear. Since they all have 10 seconds, pretty much run all 3 together, so when you go to your back bar and you need to renew your dots, you can just run all 3. Barbed Trap is where things get a little bit tricky because it lasts for 18 seconds, and it grants a very, very important buff, Minor Force. So you're going to need to basically swap to your back bar every now and then to re-up Barbed Trap in order to maintain 100% uptime here. On your front bar here, Purifying Light lasts for 6 seconds, and you have another 10-second dot here. So it's really just sort of trying to keeping an eye on Purifying Light, making sure it runs completely out before you renew it, and then when you have space where you're not renewing any dots, you'll be running Blood for Blood instead. Now, again, it is important that you let Purifying Light run the full 6 seconds in order to get the copy damage. If you decide to recast Purifying Light before the 6 seconds are up, you actually will not get the copy damage hit. You will still get the healing pool if you recast it early. So, for example, go ahead and recast it early here. You can see here that we still get the healing pool. You can still see that pool out there for 6 seconds. But beyond that, you're not getting that reflected damage. So make sure to let Purifying Light run the full 6 seconds in order to get that copied damage. So your rotation looks something like this. If you're running Channel Focus, make sure to pre-buff Channel Focus. Always start off with your source of Minor Force, whether that's Barbed Trap or Channel Acceleration. Start with your back bar dots. And you can see here that you're able to tie together those 3 dots all together. Now we do need to go to our back bar and break our front bar rotation in order to renew Barbed Trap. And that's basically it. And then you just keep an eye on your front bar dots and cast them as necessary. And that is the general idea of the rotation. So again, the back bar rotation is actually fairly simple because you can just tie 3 abilities together. So every time you're on your back bar, you just cast those 3 abilities. Then you guys have to keep an eye on Barbed Trap. You might need to break your front bar rotation to cast Barbed Trap. And then while you're on your front bar, you're just, again, keeping an eye on Purifying Light, making sure it runs completely out before you recast it, and then casting Blazing Spear. Now, when you start getting towards Execute, you have Jesus Beam, also known as Radiant Oppression here. Now, people have differing opinions on when to start using J-Beam, but generally speaking, what I like to recommend is at around 33 to 30%, you're going to drop Blood for Blood or whatever spammable that you're running, and you're going to swap it in with a Radiant Oppression, your J-Beam. Once you hit roughly 25 to 20% max health remaining on the boss, that's when you're going to drop all of your dots except for Unstable Wall and Blazing Spear. And from there on, you just have those 2 dots and then Radiant Oppression. Finally, the third cutoff point is somewhere between 15 to 10%. That's when you're just going to drop all dots Just don't use any of the dots except for Rearming Trap for the Minor Force, and just use J-Beam. So, as you can tell here, the Templar Execute actually starts much earlier than other classes that have an Execute. So, for example, the Nightblade starts at 25%. Sorks, if you're running the Sork Execute, you guys start at 20%. Templars start their Execute as early as 33%. I've seen some Templars even start as soon as 35% health remaining. So, with that, Magicka Templars, your rotation is going to be a little bit weird here, especially towards Execute, because you have all of these sort of conditionals, so to speak. I'll try to explain it all as we do our 21 million dummy parse. Now, I do want to reiterate here that the trial dummy is not necessarily going to be an indication of what you're going to be pulling in raid, both kind of in a vacuum as well as compared to other classes. And that's because the trial dummy does provide a lot of buffs, but it also is missing a couple of buffs and debuffs as well. It's missing things like Minor Courage, Martial Knowledge, Zens. It's also missing a couple of sustain tools as well. So we're missing things like Hollowfang, Master Restoration Staff, etc. While we are using Ghastly Eyebolt to try to mimic in-raid sustain scenario, it's not going to be 100% accurate. In addition, the trial dummy does not have any sort of mechanics. You're not sort of dancing around any sort of AoEs, which Magicka Templars, you will get hit harder by the mechanics that you might need to play and execute, because J-Beam is a channel, and while you're channeling, you can't block, you move very slowly as well, so your execute is going to be a little bit I can't think of the right word, but Execute's going to be a little bit tricky for you guys just because you do have that J-Beam channel, and if you do need to block it all because of certain mechanics, you will stop the channel and you'll be losing out on DPS because you won't be able to J-Beam for the full duration. So your DPS in a raid is going to be a little bit reliant on whether or not you're able to get that full channel out of all of your J-Beams. So let's go ahead and get started here with this parse. Now we will start off with a shooting star. Just recognize that once we are in a parse or actual trial, you're going to be using Crescent Sweep instead as your main spammable. Now, one thing that you might want to know about Blazing Spear is that it does have a quasi-travel time of about 1 second. So you might want to consider recasting Blazing Spear a little bit on the earlier side before the duration runs out to account for that travel time, because it actually won't deal damage during that travel time. Now, because we're using Blood for Blood, I don't really need to maintain channel focus at all. That is going to be very different if you're running Force Pulse or Puncturing Sweep or any other spamble that uses Magicka instead of health, like we're running with Blood for Blood. Basically, by not casting Channeled Focus, we're basically saving one global cooldown, which we can use instead for our spammable, which results in more DPS for us. You can see here that we're actually able to maintain our health fairly decently well with Purifying Light here. See here, I am letting Purifying Light run completely out, because if we don't let it run completely out, we don't get the reflected damage, and the reflected damage is what we're going for here. That is the bigger hit here. That's what we want to have happen. Now I am using an add-on which will tell me when it is a good time to start using J-Beam here. It should be around here that I'm going to start using J-Beam instead of Blood for Blood. See here my add-on has started telling me to use J-Beam. So here you're going to drop all the other dots except for Spear and Blockade. And around here, this is where you're going to drop everything except for Barbed Trap or whatever your source of minor force is. Just use J-Beam to the very end. You're not even going to use your ultimate, it's just straight up J-Beam till the end. So there we go. That is the Magicka Templar horse there. Again, this is using Blood for Blood, so we are a vampire here. This particular parse we pulled 87.1k. Pretty strong, and you can see here that even though we didn't use J-Beam, a lot of J-Beam, it is still going to be one of our biggest contributors to our overall DPS here. So you can see here that we're getting pretty high ticks here, a max tick of about 102k here with J-Beam. It's a very powerful ultimate. It's very powerful execute, which is why in mechanic heavy fights, sometimes you can see Magicka Templar DPS drop a little bit here in execute compared to on a trial because you have to play mechanics, and again, because it's a channel ability, you can't block, otherwise you just lose out on your ticks, which ends up dropping your overall DPS. Now, if you don't want to use Blood for Blood, if you want to use something like Puncturing Sweeps instead, this is the parse I did with Puncturing Sweeps. So this is without using Blood for Blood. This is as a non-vampire. So this is the bar setup here. So you can see I'm running Puncturing Sweep, move Solar Barrage to the front bar, and move Blazing Spear to the back bar. You can, of course, swap them out as you see fit. It's kind of up to you. This setup that I'm running is still exactly the same though. And here we pulled just shy of 83.5k. So we're missing at about 4k or so DPS by not using Blood for Blood. This is with Puncturing Sweeps instead. Sweeps is still a pretty strong spamble here. You can see here just shy of 7.7k DPS compared to Blood for Blood here, which pulled 9.8. So it's not that bad of a spamble, but it's obviously going to lose out to Blood for Blood here, both in terms of sustain as well as just overall DPS. So take a look at our Magica Sustain here. You can see here that we dropped kind of low here towards this middle section where we were hovering between 25 and 50% of our max Magicka until we started to J-Beam and execute. Compare that to here, is with Blood for Blood. Our Magicka dipped a little bit below 50% right before execute, but then it jumped back up during execute when all we had to do was just keep focusing on J-Beam here. Running Blood for Blood does help out with DPS, does help out with sustain, but I do understand that some people don't want to run a vampire, so if you want to run something like Puncturing Sweep or even Force Pulse, that is an option for you guys. Just recognize that you will be losing 4 to 5k DPS as a result, plus the obvious sustain challenges that come with using a Magicka spamble. But that pretty much covers it for this build video. Hopefully you guys found this informative. If you guys have any other questions at all, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them all to the best of my ability. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next dungeon.